The fall at the edge of civilization. From exiles to the birth of cannibal tribes. In the damp rock walls of the Galloway cave on the southwestern coast of Scotland in the 5th–10th century, the most terrifying family legend in human history was hidden. Alexander Bean, a man from a poor family in East Lothian, showed a primitive infatuation with violence from a young age when he met Agnes Douglas, who was notorious for witchcraft and murder. The two souls banished by civilization did not seek redemption. Instead, they made a pact with the darkness. They were to create a world free from human rules, a kingdom where cannibalism was the rule of survival. The cave they chose can be regarded as a natural bastion of crime. The entrance is hidden beneath the high tide line, and the twice-daily tides will erase all traces of crime. It extends nearly a mile inside and branches into countless secret chambers, forming an underground maze. Here, sunlight is a taboo. The morality of human society is a joke, and only the instincts of hunger and hunting rule everything. Bean and Agnes were not forced to eat humans. The initial hunger soon escalated into a ritual, and human flesh transformed from a necessity for survival into a sacred nutrient. Carefully smoked and cured and hung on iron hooks on the rock wall like preserved meat stored in a civilized family. 2. Education in the cave. Hunters tamed in the darkness. When Agnes gave birth to 14 children in succession deep in the cave, the second generation of the Bean family was deprived of the possibility of becoming human from birth. They had never seen the sunlight, never heard the language of civilized people. Their only education came from their parents' distorted instructions: how to ambush travelers in the dark, how to cure human flesh with seaweed to extend its shelf life, and how to remain calm in the midst of the prey screams. These children spent their childhood in bloodshed. At the age of 3, they learned to drag corpses. At 5, they observed dismemberment. And at 10, they participated in hunting. Their eyes have evolved to be exceptionally sharp in the eternal darkness, capable of capturing footsteps within 100 meters outside the cave. Their sense of smell can distinguish the difference between fresh flesh and rotten meat. Bean deliberately isolated them completely from human society. Here, morality was defined as absolute loyalty to the family. Love was manifested as the collaboration to jointly bite the prey, and the incest, despised by civilized society, became the sacred ritual to maintain pure bloodline. The mating of a son with his sister and the union of a mother with her son were not reluctant choices made in an isolated environment, but rather a carefully designed strategy by Bean. He firmly believes that the sealing of genes can prevent the pollution from the outside world and keep the family's longing for human flesh forever. By the time the third generation was born, the appearance of these offspring had already shown signs of distortion. A low and slanted forehead, prominent canine teeth, twisted joints, and a better adaptation to running on all fours. They became what Ben called pure hunters, a new species that deviated from the definition of humanity. 3 or 20 years of terror. From the disappearance of the traveler to the shaking of the kingdom. For 25 years, the coastline in the southwest of Scotland has become a death zone. Merchants, pilgrims, and messengers disappeared one after another. Under the cross by the roadside, only the bones that had been devoured were left. At first, people blamed pirates or wild beasts. But when the nobleman's son Walter Stewart went missing on the coast of Galloway, King James I finally ordered a thorough investigation. The investigation team discovered terrifying evidence near the cave. Mountains of human bones and tiny tooth marks still remaining on the Nord skulls. The earthenware jars on the rock wall were filled with pickled human meat. The cradle of the child is covered with fragments of the traveler's clothes. The most terrifying part was the storage room deep in the cave. Over 30 fresh corpses were hung upside down, with blood dripping into the stone trough, ready to be made into the next delicious meal. When the army charged into the cave, the reaction of the Bean family exposed their long-lost humanity. 48 men, women, the elderly, and children, roaring like wild beasts, pounced on the soldiers, biting their armor with their teeth and scratching their flesh with their nails. Ultimately, this bloody siege ended with the arrest of the entire clan. However, The soldiers discovered that these people could even understand the meaning of judgment in their perception. Hunting and being hunted were merely the norm of survival. 4. The Final Judgment. Civilization against barbarism by hanging in Edinburgh Square in 1430. 48 members of the Bean family were subjected to the most brutal punishment in British history. Adult men were skinned alive, their limbs nailed to carriages and paraded through the streets until they bled to death. Women and children were burned at the fire, and their ashes were scattered into the sea. Just like the remains of the victims they had once discarded, the onlookers cursed with the thrill of revenge, but no one realized the irony of this trial. The savages of the Bean family were precisely the products of rejection and exile in a civilized society. The distorted order they established in the cave merely pushed the law of the survival of the fittest in human history to an extreme. When the last family member roared in the fire, there was no fear in his eyes, only confusion. He still couldn't understand why the survival rules he followed were regarded as evil by the outside world. V. Dark Legacy. Questioning humanity beyond the cave. The story of the Bean family was recorded in the 15th century Scottish chronicles and became the most famous cannibal tribe legend in European history. But the horror of this story does not lie in their atrocities themselves, but in the cruel truth it reveals. When a group is completely deprived of the nourishment of civilization and surrounded by hatred and isolation, human nature will deteriorate at an astonishing rate, and violence and cannibalism may merely be extreme manifestations of the instinct for survival. Today, the entrance to the Galloway Cave has been submerged by the sea, but local fishermen still pass on a legend. On a full moon night, one can hear the sound of bones being gnawed from the bottom of the sea. The Bean family has left the world not only a bloody history, but also a mirror. It reflects how civilized society creates outliers through exclusion and oppression, and also reveals the untamed darkness hidden in the hearts of every human being.